Hi, my name's Chris Rodriguez and I'm a member of the Arts Collective. I have been quilting since I was 4 years, or I've been sewing since I was 4 years old, and I've been quilting since I was 16. And so I'd like to introduce you and welcome you to my quilt show. So if we come on in. Quilting's not really your grandma's quilting anymore. It's changed. We still do the same things with applique and piecework, but a lot of things have changed. We've got modern materials and modern cutting methods. So this tulip quilt is a form of applique quilting, and then it is machine stitched on a home machine. This is one of my favorite pieces that I've shown at Artwalk before. It's called Bunnies on Drugs. And if you remember back on Project Runway, the first winner, Jay McCarroll, he took his money and he designed fabric. So what I've done is I've taken the bunnies in his fabric and I've enlarged them and created an applique out of those. I also do other fabric things besides the quilting. Here's a bag that I've made, and then I've quilted the bag. I also sew. And I've been able to teach for the Arts Collective and teach beginning classes. This one is called Family Heritage. What it is, it's a cathedral quilt, which is a very traditional quilt pattern, but then what I've done is I've embellished it with pieces of jewelry, brooches that are from my husband's family and from my family. My Hawaiian quilt, every time I go on vacation I buy fabric, which kind of drives my husband nuts. And so he said, you need to start doing something with the fabric. So this represents probably a couple trips to Hawaii. This piece is, I call Starry Night, and it's Homer Hickam. I worked for the City of Burbank Library, and that was our All City Reads book. And so in honor of that book, I went ahead and did this. This is an example of foundation piecing. What you do is you use a tissue paper and then you keep applying fabric to that. Okay. In here, this is a traditional windows quilt, and on the back wall is my piece for Frogtown Artwalk 2016. I try to do a river quilt every year. And so that's my representation of the LA River. It's got about 100 frogs and ducks appliqued to it. I've dabbled a little bit in machine embroidery, so these koi fish on this quilt I was able to do with I did on an embroidery sewing machine. On this side is my beach quilt, and I brought some examples. So one very traditional quilt block that everybody would recognize is that's called a 9-patch, and that's what you think about with traditional quilting. Well, what you do with a 9-patch is that you cut it apart and then you cut it into quarters, and there's several different ways you can assemble it, so that if you look at the beach quilt long enough you can see how I've assembled the quarters. This is my little origami frog. And that's in honor, I make my husband Hawaiian shirts. I've made my shirt. And so just to remember the various shirts, I take scraps from his shirts and make frogs out of them. And down here we had a company picnic, and so we needed a game. So I did it, it's a form of applique, and we made a beanbag toss. This particular quilt, it's called a 1600 quilt, because what you take 40-inch strips of fabric that are 2.5 inches wide, and you sew them together end to end so that you have one piece of fabric that's 1600 inches long. And you take the ends and fold them together and seam it, so then you've got a piece of fabric that's 800, and keep doing that till you get to the size of the quilt. I've also, with that technique, cut it apart into blocks to make this blue quilt. And then this one is utilizing fabrics from Cafe Facet. One of the nice things about quilting, or one of the modern quilting, is that there's so much fabric, different patterns and things that you can choose from. And a lot of quilters are even going on sites like Spoonflower, and they're actually designing their own fabric. These are a few of the clothing items that I've made. And This bag is an example of a beginning sewing class that I taught for the Arts Collective. And not only does it teach basic sewing skills, but people can take home something they can use. Here's two of the latest things that I've made. This one is a little gathered shirt. It's made with Frida Kahlo fabric that I was able to find online. And this is made with Kantha fabric. It comes pre-quilted. It comes from India, and what they've done is they've taken used saris and then pieced them together, repair any kind of holes, and then they sell it as a bedspread. And so I took the bedspread and recut it and made the coat out of it. Another class we might have for Arts Collective is this apron, which is just a simple crossover in the back. But that would be another example of a beginning class that we would teach. I do embroidery. And so at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was trying to think of another class that I might teach for Arts Collectives. So we'd teach the basing stitching, and then once got a little bit of confidence, this is something that probably anybody who can embroider, they'd be able to graduate and make themselves a frog or a turtle. And they're stuffed with rice so that you can put them in the microwave and heat them up and then use them as a heating pad. So I've been fortunate that I've actually sold a few pieces. This cube is actually a 18-inch footrest. It was a curb fine piece of furniture that I made the fabric using quilting techniques, and then I reupholstered the footstool. A chair that I made, again I made the fabric. These two were both sold through Cactus Gallery, which is one of our galleries here in the valley. And then I entered into the art contest, and this was my entry for the Artwalk Art Contest pandemic. It was hanging by a thread, and I really feel these days that we're all hanging by a thread. The picture down here is from the 2018 Art Walk when we were down at the corner of Newell and Blake. We were able to hang them in the garden. Finally, this last piece down here, it's my version of the sun. So I want to thank you for stopping by the quilt show today, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the Art Walk this year.